Everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year. A little late coming back from our Christmas vacation hiatus, whatever you want to call it. But thank you, everyone. Coming to you from the Napa Valley wine country, just outside the mystical Sonoma Mountains. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz, and thank you for joining us on this special interview today. It is Sunday, January 13th, 2019, first show of the year. Man, we're already halfway into the month. Crazy. Like we just started this year and it's already halfway into this month. What's going on? You can follow us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015, trending with the hashtag Beyonders for posts, comments, or questions for the show. You can also make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Strange YouTube channel. Remember to set your alerts to receive new notifications of videos and live streams. You find the show on Facebook, Instagram, and Google+, all under Beyond the Strange. We're also on Stitcher as well. And yeah, keep checking beyondthestrange.com for future updates, new merchandise, giveaways, prizes, and all that stuff, and how you can support the show. Go to www.beyondthestrange.com. That's www.beyondthestrange.com. And check things out there. But we got a great show for you tonight, everybody. I'm really happy to have my guest, Constantine St. Michael. We're going to talk to him here in a few minutes. First, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about had to transition that real quick. A little bit about Project Blue Book. I was anticipating this show quite a bit, and I'm really glad I was able to catch it. And I wanted to give my 2 cents. I really think they did a good job. It was very close to something similar like X-Files and Fringe. If you guys are familiar, I'm sure you are familiar with those shows. I think so. I mean, I really think they did a good job. And I'm really glad that they came out with Project Blue Book. It was something that has been really needed to come up, to come out more. And a little bit of background on Project Blue Book. It's mainly a story that's covering the Roswell crash and a few other instances. If you're familiar with Professor J. Allen Hynek, he was hired by the U.S. government, Air Force actually, basically to debunk all the UFO cases that were coming up in the early 50s to the late 60s, and they all fell under a project, of course, called Project Blue Book. And the one that they started off with on the show, the first episode, was the Foo Fighters incident. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it involved a military plane that got into a dogfight with like these balls of light, or a ball of light, and they couldn't explain how this happened, and they had to take the Air Force, the pilot's word for it. Basically, he said there was a ball of light in the sky. Heard a bunch of stuff over the radio, and it took over my plane, and it pretty much made him crash land, but he survived. And it was a really, really cool episode. A lot of the stuff is added for fluff, of course, but I have to hand it to Aidan Gillen for I don't know if you guys watch Game of Thrones, but He's Littlefinger on Game of Thrones, and he was just really good as J. Allen Hynek, and it's just a really good timepiece show. I think it's going to do really good, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, um, Project Blue Book, definitely something worth to watch. I believe it's on Tuesday nights on History Channel, and yeah, check it out. Check your listings, your local listings for when it comes out. Um, but you're gonna love it, I guarantee it. So check it out, Project Blue Book. So, and also, I wanted to announce that I've been talking with my old buddy Joe Roop, who runs the station, the Fringe FM, and it's very possible that we might be moving the show on Sunday nights, the live format to the Fringe FM. It's going to be on the station, so a little bit more about that later. I haven't set that in stone, but I just wanted to put it out there to you guys who are listening, and it's gonna be really cool if everything all works out. See how it goes. But as you guys know, I helped Joe build the Fringe over a year ago, and it's grown into something really awesome. And well, not over a year ago, but over 2 years ago, actually. I'm sorry. I've been gone. I left. I left the station about a year ago, pretty close to it, and it's just been doing really well. And sure, why not come back and pick the Sunday night slot again? So we'll see what happens. I'll probably be at 7 p.m. though, but that's right. I know you guys stay up late and you love to listen to your paranormal. Definitely get that here on Beyond the Strange. All right, that's enough of that. One more time, Constantine is an intuitive, sees, hears, feels beyond five physical senses. He helps the living understand the dead, and the dead understand themselves. Foundation for Constantine's work is knowing and understanding the true nature of reality. He claims only then can we know and understand the phenomena we investigate. Constantine works independently and also as a team member of Deadline Paranormal. Deadline Paranormal is based in Northeast Pennsylvania and is composed of active and retired law enforcement personnel, as well as a clinical psychologist. He's also assisted law enforcement by aiding in criminal investigations. As an intuitive, Constantine can remotely pre-read investigation sites, photographs, situations, or people, and typically, when on site, begin the investigation process with a walkthrough, trying to know who and what their clients are dealing with. He can work remotely for individuals and paranormal teams who are sincere and desire to understand. He has a process for remote work using conscious triangulation and neutral information. If requested, you can travel to an investigation site or situation with appropriate arrangements. You can reach Constantine through www.deadlineparanormal.com or on Facebook at Constantine St. Michael. Please, everybody, help me welcome Constantine St. Michael. Constantine, thank you for joining the show tonight.
Well, thank you very much. Who is that guy? He sounds interesting.
He sounds interesting. Yeah, man. Been a while. How do they say that?
I don't know.
Something in the making or something like that. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, it's been a while in the making for sure.
Yeah, we were talking I think sometime back in July last year.
Oh, was it really that long?
It was quite a while ago.
I don't know. I lost track, Dave.
You're like, man, I give up. I don't blame you. No, I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight to talk to the audience and tell us what you do. So thank you again. Let's get a little bit of background. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rhode Island. Rhode Island,
Thought I heard a
the
bit of an accent there.
yeah, I can't help it. It slips through. It's and you know what's even worse is I now have a Pennsylvania accent with hard R's, and that's the opposite of Rhode Island where you have no R's. So yeah, Rhode Island. Most of my life, I've been in Northeast Pennsylvania for about 4 years, so I live here now.
Right on, right on. And what when did you start noticing you had these gifts or talents, if you
Well,
will?
yeah, I avoid the term gift because if you think it's a gift, then you think you're gifted. And I don't believe that I'm gifted. I just believe that I'm who I am. As simple as that. I've always had it. I've always known about it.
Hmm.
I certainly didn't understand it when I was 6 years old, but it's always been a natural process to me. Um, so it's not like I suddenly became aware of it,
Hmm.
but it's uh, as I've matured, it's matured. So I used to make like outrageous statements when I was young that would just flip my parents out. They just wanted me to go away sometimes, but
Hmm.
I was just a kid, just sharing my thoughts.
Did they
But
like didn't want you to freak out the neighbors or anything, or what?
no, they just say, I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. I grew up in very simple times, and my parents were like, "Ooh, you know, what kind of kid do I have?" But they were cool. They just didn't understand it. They were, we were just simple, regular people.
Right.
I didn't understand. It's not like I could explain it to them. I was just living it.
Did you know very many people that may have helped you along the line, like to understand
Um,
what you're going through besides your family?
no, no, I really haven't. I'll be very honest. I've never really met anyone that does what I do.
Okay.
Um, Now that sounds, egotistical, I'm sure, but I just have never really met anybody who thought about the world like I do in terms of the paranormal. And so I've kind of trained myself, um, but I was influenced early on. I grew up in the 70s. So that was the time of a lot of new information coming into the world. There was no internet. You got your information from books. So things kind of filtered in slowly from different sources. But
Hmm.
one book that I would recommend, it's kind of serious reading, is Gestalt Therapy Verbatim by Fritz Perls, who it was a popular book in the 60s and 70s when psychological theory, self-help books like Understand the Nature of the Human Personality books were coming out.
Hmm.
And that shaped my concept of how people operate in reality. It kind of ignited a spark, I think. I've always been interested in behavior. So even when I was young, I understood behavior of adults sometimes better than adults did.
Hmm.
So I've always been interested in understanding behavior. Why do people do what they do, and what do their actions actually mean? So I have that mentality when it comes to the paranormal. Uh, the paranormal is not paranormal at all. It's completely normal. And it happens to everyone all the time. It's a process. It's the natural process of what happens when your body ceases to function. And it can be fully understood by anyone.
The cycle of life,
It's the
basically.
cycle of life. But that's true. But I want to know what it really is. Like, what is a spirit? What's causing that apparition or voice or sensation? Why is that there? And my whole viewpoint has been to take the mysticism out of all this and look at it as no different than birth. There's a process of consciousness coming into a body.
Mhm.
Well, there's a process of consciousness separating from the body.
You
And
know,
that's,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and that's, to me, it's, I really don't believe in magic. There's nothing magic. It's, people want fanciful, mystical belief systems that are fun and interesting. And, it's really, reality is really much more interesting than that.
What what was the we were talking earlier today, and
Mhm.
you mentioned something that stuck out. The communication with the dead, you called it a language. And I never stopped to think about that. Perhaps the dead and the living kind of have some kind of barrier, but there is a common language between them. I would think it would just be whatever that person spoke before they passed away or died. I said passed earlier and kind of corrected
Yeah.
me on it. But when they die, when they when they go on to the next level or whatever. But the other thing that I've always been intrigued with is if a person can communicate with a spirit or a ghost or whatever you want to call him, and that person spoke a different language than the person that can communicate, how does that work?
Well, it doesn't. Um, First of all, you just I warned you about this, but you talked
I'll
about
bring you
going to
back if we
another.
have to. I said
No,
I
you
warned
talked
you about
about.
that too.
No, you talked about going to another level. Well, no, there is no other level. You don't go anywhere. There
Hmm.
is no anywhere to go to. Language. I think I don't remember my exact statement, but what I'm sure I meant was not verbal language,
Hmm.
but every interaction with a spirit, and we'll just to keep it simple, use that term to mean ghost, or whatever. Spirit is communication. It's all communication. So if they appear, it's an attempt to communicate because they're struggling.
Hmm.
They're struggling, or they are uh, the same person they were in life. So if they were doing nasty things in life, they can want to do nasty things after they're dead. They're just people. They have all the traits and foibles of people
Hmm.
because they're people.
Right.
They don't turn into, floaty spirits that, have mystical music playing around. It's not like that. They're people who are ill. Many times they're people who had mental illness. Those people who are mentally ill, and I'll use that broad category, struggle a lot after their body ceases to function because they weren't on top of their ego in life, so they're not on top of their ego at all in death. And oftentimes in death, a person's ego struggles can be fragmented. So people can sometimes they're very similar to their whole person when they were alive, and you can relate to them like that whole person. But sometimes they're fragmented, literally blown into pieces, like a schizophrenic might be in life. and you have to figure out how those pieces fit together. It might seem like multiple people, but it's really just one person that's fragmented.
I like that. I mean, I like that explanation because I don't think I've ever heard anyone break it down that way.
No, you never have.
No, I'm not kidding.
I know.
I don't think I ever have, and I think that's a very great explanation to why there's so many different stories of what these
Right.
ghosts do and how they interact with people when they come across a person comes across a home that's haunted. I know that there's no such thing really as a haunted home. I mean, spirits are everywhere, ghosts are everywhere. It doesn't matter. They could be in the middle of the street. They could be in a park. They can be on a lake. It doesn't matter. They could be in the freeway.
They're going to be seen in a space that has meaning to them.
There you go.
That's where they're going to be seen. So your uncle might have passed in his house, but may have had a horrible event happen or that he participated in at your house. So he might be seen in your house because that's where his ego struggle is at that period. But what you just said is a wonderful um, compliment to. This sounds wrong to me, but I mean that's the best thing that someone can say to me
Mm-hmm.
is, and I hear this a lot when someone says, you know, I never thought about that. That makes sense. Because then I feel like I've done good work and I was able to explain a very complicated, highly intangible, conceptual thing. It's tough to put it into words.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can understand that. I've never had a conversation with a spirit or a ghost or anything like that. I think the closest thing would be maybe speaking to a dead relative in my dream
Hmm.
or a friend. Maybe we can get to that a little bit later. Maybe you can help me understand that a
Sure,
little bit.
of course.
But I haven't really had a language communication with someone that's died. Now, I will say I bring this up all the time because it was my only investigation so far since I've been doing the show. But I did manage to do one investigation at this one place here in where I close to where I live, and I'll tell you, it was very bizarre to feel the energy of the person that died in that location. And when I came back with a medium, they explained to me what was happening, why it was happening, and so on. And when I found out that, because what had happened was the first time I went to this location, I went with my wife, and it was a tri-level home, old Victorian home. It was turned into an art museum, but the people who had lived in that house had died, and they, obviously
Hmm.
stayed there. And there had it's like a local there was local stories about this place. And so I decided, hey, I'll just stop by, take a look, and see what happens, man. Just whatever. Did not expect to actually get what I got when I went to the second floor of this place. And I all of a sudden started feeling sick. I started feeling like I was going to pass out. My chest started hurting. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Hmm.
Then I went across the room, still on the second floor. After that, I started feeling perfectly fine. Like, that's really weird. Something over there is making me sick. So I went back to that place where I was, started happening again. I'm like, this is weird. Don't like it. I'm out of here. So went back downstairs, talked with the patron who runs the museum, and I'm like, listen, have you ever had this weird feeling if you go to the second floor right away? elderly lady, by the way. She's like, I don't go up there. I'm like,
Mm,
really? She's like, oh no, I don't go up there, honey. I'm like,
yeah,
okay. Now we're getting somewhere. So when I came back with the medium explained to me that where I was standing was the place where the man who lived there had a heart attack and died.
right,
And I was like, oh my God, I actually felt a ghost. I felt the energy.
right.
And so, in that sense, I
And
mean,
what do you think that means?
well, I mean, I think, in my opinion, that it's possible they were trying to communicate to me
They
what,
absolutely were.
just to let me know that they're there.
Mm, this is how I would interpret your story, and it's just an interpretation from your words.
Hmm.
But one of the things that happens lots of times is just as there are miscommunications in life, there are miscommunications and misinterpretations in the paranormal. And lots of times people, excuse me, will think that that sensation you had is an aggressive move and that the ghost tries to make people sick because he's a mean person or whatever it is. But in reality, my first thought is that's his ego struggle.
Mm.
He hasn't dealt with his own death and he relives it over and over again because he can't accept it. And what you're feeling is his plea for help. Typically, when you sense how someone died, it's because they're um, sharing their agony with you and they can't get out of it. They can't resolve it. They're desperate.
Right.
So we need to try and help those people move along. Can I make a little statement here?
Sure.
Well, here's an example. A client that I'm still working with. Um, I made a determination that there was a paranormal issue in her life and her family's life, because it was a question whether there really was, and I kind of did my thing, and I thought, yeah, there really is. So, anyways, I identified a deceased family member, a great aunt, who was at the root of this, and I identified her as being involved in the paranormal because there are certain things I can smell, and I'll use that term. I can smell drugs, I can smell sexual abuse, and I can smell the occult. They all leave a stain that is palpable, it's
Mm.
knowable. So, anyways, this I determined that she was involved in the occult. And right after I'm kind of the image of this woman is forming in my head, and I'm kind of getting to know her. And I picked her out of a picture. I made a correct identification. But all of a sudden, she says, "Ask your uncle." And I heard words. I don't always hear words, but I heard words. Ask your uncle about the dog. And I explained that to my client.
Hmm.
She didn't know anything about it. And then I heard the words, I killed the dog.
Oh,
And
wow.
I interpreted this as this woman who definitely had, um, well, an evil with a small e kind of life being involved in the occult. She was a vindictive person. But anyways, I thought that was like, ha ha ha, I killed the dog. But just a few days ago, I was thinking about this case,
Hmm.
and the woman um, communicated with me. I was at my house, and I had a conscious link with her. And once I link to her consciousness, I could understand what they're trying to communicate. And I realized that she said, I killed the dog. She wasn't threatening. She was in agony, saying, I killed the dog, in disbelief that she actually did that. That was summed up the reason that she's still here. She looked back at so many hurtful things that she had done. And at that point, I knew the process of resolution for her had begun.
How do you distinguish that?
Distinguish what?
I mean, what you just said. I mean, you can take a statement and you can take it the wrong way. But if you but how do you take that statement? Like you said, I killed the dog.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God, this vindictive person, like you just said.
Right.
But then you realize, oh, killed the dog.
Right.
And
because I felt her.
You actually feel the sincerity.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. It's like I can see her consciousness.
Wow.
The reason that I can do this too is because not only can I see, and I'll use that word in quotes, their consciousness, but they see me. For some reason, they see me. And that's one of the reasons it's easy for me, because I don't have to like push the bushes aside to see them.
Right.
We see each other. And once we see each other, a conscious link is created and the communication begins. And they're not always cooperative. You know, they're people, once again. But a whole different view of this woman from being this evil witch, which she literally was. She practiced witchcraft. In Pennsylvania, this is hill country, and there is still, I mean, and certainly years ago, there is still kind of some hill country mentality about witchcraft and casting spells, and
right.
You know what I mean? It's still alive and well in parts of Pennsylvania. Folk belief.
Right. That's amazing.
So, anyways, I tell you what. When I first got involved with this person, I knew it was going to be a difficult case, and I take my work seriously. You know, I'm not. When I get involved, I work, and I work with the goal of helping someone. I don't just fool around with it. So we had been communicating for a while, and I knew that this was going to be a situation that was going to take time. It was not going to happen fast. And finally, we all agreed for me to come to her house. She lives with her parents, and I met her mother and father. And I've been saying the whole time that her father is key. I said, your father is absolutely involved with this. And just by a miscommunication, I didn't realize that this woman was the father's aunt. I thought it was the mother's aunt. And when I learned that it was the father's aunt, I looked at him, I said, well, that explains it. You know, it's funny, when I work, everybody feels it. You can feel it when I work. Everybody feels it. You know, the consciousness temperature goes up in the room.
Oh, now that's interesting, because I've always thought it goes down.
Well, that's a cold spot. I'm talking about consciousness in a sense. It's like when I am functioning.
Me, but I'm starting to get it.
Yeah, I know. I figure it out every day. I say things in my head and continually try to work out the proper explanations to make it as easy as possible to make sure I'm communicating correctly and getting these points across, because it's difficult. Like, I just accept them, but put it in words, sometimes crazy. Yeah.
Well, I want to change the convo a little bit, and I want to get back to more of your previous experience, and let the audience know. By the way, I want to say thank you and for everyone joining the chat. And there, Donnie and Lisa, Mahoney, Amy, Deb. Thank you all for being there. I appreciate it. And we already got some questions in there. I'll take those questions after the break. So everyone, go ahead and put your questions in there, and we'll get to them with Constantine after the break, and we'll get some more information on that. So Constantine, you when we talked earlier, you mentioned that you've had dozens of investigations under your belt with just Deadline Paranormal, and you have more investigations before that. So some of these investigations, like the one you were just talking to me about with this witch, do they all seem to be in that category, or do they vary?
Well, they vary, but usually, if a client is coming to me through Facebook, or they're coming to me through Deadline, or Deadline's working on a case, one of the things that you see is the similarities to all of them. So everyone's different because it's people, and people are all different. So every spirit is an individual person. But at the same time, you see the same thing over and over again. The same things happen, the same feelings. And it's pretty interesting to see how consistent, even though to the individuals, they're scared and they think this is like Hollywood and it's unique and mystical. But in reality, it's not, because your haunting sounds exactly like this haunting, sounds exactly like that haunting. Very similar. And it's just got a different person as the ghost.
You definitely find the differences between some of these ghosts or entities and the situations where the way they died.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And in your resume, I see that you had mentioned that you help the living understand the dead, and the dead understand themselves. Now, when you say that, does that mean that these dead people have not even known that they're dead, that they need to understand that they need to move on?
Well, it's by degree. Some literally are not conscious. Now remember, their consciousness, but they are fragmented, and they're not actually conscious of all their fragments and that they're dead. So sometimes all they are experiencing is their final moment of death, and they just live in that without understanding from the outside that they're living that, because that's the only thing that's left, is that fragment of their personality. So, but most of them know they're dead, but can't face the struggle of their ego struggles that they're remaining. So let's say you were a very bad person in life. And I'm just going to be graphic and say you murdered 5 children or something like that. Right. That person may have a very, very difficult time accepting the fact that they murdered 5 children, because when their body ceases to function, the consciousness can look at the ego. So the consciousness doesn't have ego struggles. So when it looks at your own ego, it has to choose to accept the horror of what you did to somebody else and feel it. You have to, you own it. Everything you do in life, you own when your body stops. It doesn't go away. So there is no free pass, ever. Those people will often stick around.
So you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, of course,
Yep.
if a sociopath in this life dies they will face their consequences by owning up to, oh my God, what had I done?
Yes. That is what karma is. Karma is not what the popular belief is, that what goes around comes around. Because the first thing I would say is, if that were true, you could see it. Look around you. Bad people live in luxury and never get karma. It doesn't work like that. Life doesn't work like that. It's a nice belief. It's comforting to think that if somebody screws you, they're going to get theirs. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But in death, it's all yours. You own every single thing you ever did. And that is karma. Karma applies after you're
Mhm.
dead.
Really sounds to me like almost like you're judging yourself.
Yes.
Wow.
It's about responsibility.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Every decision you make, you're responsible for. And that responsibility does not end just because you don't have a body. There is fixed truth. It's not all just what you choose to believe. There's a fixed truth that everyone will experience. And the proof of that is everyone dies. 100%, everyone. That's fixed truth.
Got to ask this question. What
Go for it.
do you tell people that come from religious backgrounds and say, I don't believe in ghosts and spirits because this scripture, whatever Bible or scriptures they read from their religion, tells them that when a person dies, that's it. They are dead, and they are not. They're going to stay dead until the day of judgment, and then that's when all of that happens. So what exactly are we talking about that you have been communicating with or I have experienced? Would they be spirits? Are they different from ghosts, from people who died? Are there already spirits out there is what I'm trying to say. Maybe demons, if you will.
Mm,
Because it
well,
seems to me that people have this notion that let's take a demon for instance. A demon
mhm.
can be invisible and tell you, "Hey, I'm your dad that passed away, and I know everything about you," and they do. How can you know the difference between a ghost and a demon?
Well, um, that's a complicated question. So let me do my best and preface it with this analogy. The only thing that exists is consciousness. Consciousness creates reality.
Mm-hmm.
And just for, I'm going to use simple terms, and I don't mean to sound simplistic, but I think these images kind of help uh, people to understand my point.
Okay.
Think of reality as a bubble. It's all one thing, but there are two sides to it.
Mm-hmm.
One side of the bubble is, let's call that evil, because this is the plane of duality. There is good and there is evil. There is hot, there is cold, there is dark, there is light. Everything is dualistic. So if people constantly make decisions which lead them towards the evil side of the bubble, they will reap the consequences of that, as opposed to when you make decisions that lead you to the good side of the bubble. And the good side of the bubble leads you to be able to release your ego and go back to just being consciousness. So people who move towards the evil side end up in what you might say as purgatory or limbo, because there is no hell. Hell is knowing that you'll never go back to consciousness, and that you have to exist in your ego struggle forever.
When you say
That's
consciousness,
hell.
do you mean the way we are on this plane right now? In a human
I
body,
mean,
flesh?
no, I mean independent of reality.
Okay.
Consciousness is not energy, it's consciousness. Energy exists in reality, consciousness exists outside of reality.
Okay.
It is its own thing.
Okay. Well, we can
And
get
will
into
never
that
be.
later. I
Yeah,
mean,
okay.
I want to go ahead and finish. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish your story.
No. Yeah. So, you're talking about demons. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Right.
So, demons, in my experience, are always people that have just backed themselves into a corner of the bubble of reality. Um, I've never, I mean, I've had some pretty harsh characters present themselves to me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hang with them long enough, you realize that they're just almost like children trying to fight you off with scary images while they suffer. So I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in angels. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of that. Silence.
I'm letting it sink in, man.
Yeah.
And you're not the first person
God,
to come across and say those kind of things. So to me,
no, of course not.
it doesn't, it's like, okay, that, I
So
mean, it
you
makes
asked,
sense. I mean, that,
yeah,
the way you believe and you think, and what makes you tick if you want to go there.
right, right. So you asked about religious people. Well, my answer to that is that belief is something you adopt. It's like a jacket, you put it on. You can choose to put on this jacket, you can choose to put on a different jacket. Knowing is what it's all about, and they're two different things. But people have very rigid belief systems that I don't use myself. But if that's what you need to calm your anxiety and get you through the day and helps you do the right thing, then it's a good thing. If your belief system influences your behavior to make the right decisions, then it's okay. If that's what you need in your life to be a good person, then go for it. And I'll never criticize that.
In some instances, I think structure is good,
Yeah.
and it couldn't hurt. But when it becomes extreme, then people need to be put in check.
Well, it's
That's my view.
good,
That's my very very brief,
yeah,
vague view of religion.
right.
And I don't want to get into that right now. But
Right.
but yeah, no, I completely understand. I tell you what, Constantine, let's take a quick
Okay.
break, and we'll come back. We'll speak a little bit more about ghosts and spirits, and get some questions from the audience. How's that sound?
It sounds great.
And yeah, I think that'll be awesome. You are listening to Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave Cruz. You're speaking with Constantine St. Michael. Don't go away. We're right back right after this.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen to. It has always haunted me. What you're about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
I've seen the Martians eat.
What in heaven's name is it?
I don't know. Beyond the Strange.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, ghost hauntings, various cryptoids, such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you are listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links in forums and social media. Available at Speaker.com, YouTube, and Google Hangouts.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could...
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you all for being here tonight. We are speaking with Constantine St. Michael. Constantine is a paranormal investigator and intuitive. He's worked with groups such as Deadline Paranormal. Also, he's worked with the authorities, police, and law enforcement, and assisted them in aiding in criminal investigations. And right now we're just getting a really good feel. And I'd like to say we get, getting to know Constantine. So I'm really happy that he's here. And Constantine, thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
There's quite a few questions before the break, and I appreciate everyone that's very interested in this topic, and they're talking about in the chat. They're just going on. It's great. I love the interaction. So thank you all again for doing that. One of the questions, of course, was the religious question, and it was interesting because I also come from a religious background. I'm more of a spiritual background. I don't want to really get into it, but basically I have my own beliefs. And that question about the about how can a person, how can there be ghosts if when a person dies, the spirit goes right to heaven or to hell. Good explanation on your part about what you believe in. And that there is no heaven or hell or anything like that, but basically you're no longer with consciousness. That's an interesting explanation. There was a question in here, I believe it's from Donnie in Alaska, wanted to know if you had read a book. Let me see if I can find it. And I just had it. Hold on a second. It should. I'm sure you read books about this topic and situations.
Well, some of them, sure.
Oh, here it is. Deborah Lynn Katz. You are a psychic. The art of clairvoyant reading and healing. Do you consider yourself a clairvoyant or a psychic?
No, I don't like that term.
What's the difference? What you're doing and
Well,
what they do. Let me ask you that.
Well, maybe nothing, but there is a difference in words, and there's a difference in what those words mean.
Uh-huh.
And a psychic, for example, I can't pick the next winning lottery numbers. I don't see your dead grandmother floating above you while I'm talking to you. I don't move spirits along with crystals and sage smudging.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do any of that. And my goal is to take out all that, and I'm just going to lump it.
Okay.
This always produces a bad response, as New Age philosophies. To me, it's no different than tying your shoes. It's a process, it's definable, it's understandable, it's knowable. It's not magic, it's not spiritualism, it's not mystical. It's real. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to understand.
Right. No,
So I've never read that book,
mm-hmm.
and I don't consider myself a psychic or a medium. I don't choose to use those terms. You have to label yourself, unfortunately, as something. Intuitive is the best I could do.
Do you believe that we are energy?
What do you mean, we?
As in human beings.
I believe that when you're in reality, there's energy, but consciousness is not energy. Consciousness is itself. Consciousness is before energy. So you're never going to find proof of consciousness by trying to find it by studying energy. Proof of something that exists outside of reality is not going to be found using the reality that you're in to find it. So,
still trying to grasp that philosophy. I mean, we can definitely talk about that some more, but it's the consciousness.
you were doing so well.
I know.
You were doing so well.
It's okay. Maybe I am doing the fake it till you make it, but we'll get back to that. And thank you, No Baloney Mahoney, for that. It was more of a comment and then a question, but I turned it into a question. So, by the way, Mahoney says, "Love you, Constantine. I'm from Scranton."
Are you kidding me? That's funny.
That's what she says. I believe No Baloney Mahoney is female. I'm gonna say she, and she has a looks like a female picture there.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but
well,
anyways,
that's cool.
There you go, Scranton in the house. Amy has a question. What are your thoughts on channelers such as Edgar Casey, and Jane Roberts?
I'm not really sure to make an unequivocal statement about either of those two people. But what I would say is that I believe all knowledge is available to all people at any time. So, is there a possibility that they are producing appropriate information? Yes. I would think the proof of that would be in their information. So if you call yourself a channeler and you're producing this information that you couldn't possibly have known, and it's validated by being accurate, well, then I guess you know what you're doing. Edgar Casey, I think a lot of times, unfortunately, there's a desire to make money out of things, which is, human nature. I'm not going to get crazy about that. But I also think that when that happens, when you become aware of these people through books or articles or media, you're seeing selective events and statements about them. So I'm sure both of these people said some ridiculous things that never get published. Just like in my work, sometimes I can just be flat out wrong. But we don't talk about that when I'm on an interview. We only talk about the ones where I'm really cool,
Right. No, I get you. I get it.
So, I think it could work, but I don't really know. I mean, I've read a little bit about Edgar Casey. I've never read Jane Roberts, but I know who she is.
Mhm.
So I don't know how to answer that exactly.
What about in general? Do you? I mean, have you? You said that you've never seen a ghost, but
No.
they're there. How does that language happen? Is it like you hear somebody talking to you?
Well, thoughts, images, sounds, smells
You mentioned the smells,
form
yeah. Mhm.
in my mind. So there, it's occasionally, like as I was saying earlier, I actually hear words, but most of the time it's their thoughts. I just have these thoughts. And the reason I'm good at what I do is I've learned how to pick out the meaningful thoughts from the useless chatter that happens in your brain. I just kind of listen to the chatter stream in my brain and I let it lead me where it feels like it should lead me. And then I pull out the most seemingly meaningful thoughts from that. And I don't edit. That's one thing I will tell my clients is I don't edit. So sometimes I say ridiculous things and I understand that, but I'm just going to tell you what I'm getting. And almost every time those ridiculous statements make sense after we figured out what's going on. They were only ridiculous at the time. So that's the trick, is knowing how to not select the right information, the pertinent information, and then not edit.
Another
And that's
comment.
something that I've learned over the years. I've gotten better at it.
Right. Another comment came in from Mahoney and says, "So you perceive from all senses and put it all together."
Yeah, kind of. It's hard. It's hard to describe, and it's different all the time. Like what happened the other night with the witchy woman. That had never happened to me like that before, where I was sitting just quietly in my house, and all of a sudden, it's physical for me. It's overwhelming. My skin starts to tighten up, my eyes tear up, and I thought, oh, she's here. I got her. And, we had a little session. That was the first time that had ever happened.
That is so interesting and amazing. I don't know what it's like for
Well,
you. I mean, I don't know if it's horrifying or if it's
no, it's
normal
not hard.
or, would you call it
It's
normal for you?
well, I guess it's exhilarating
Cool.
is what it is.
Hmm.
When when my consciousness is functioning that way, it's exhilarating because you're understanding reality in a whole different perspective. I mean, you're looking at the ground you're walking on differently. Everything changes.
Mhm.
It's really fatiguing. And it looks like I'm just walking around mumbling to myself, and it really takes a toll, believe me.
That reminds me of a question I want to ask you, but I'll ask you later. And it's a good one too. So would you say that the witchy woman is what you're most you've been doing mostly lately? This more
That's what
recent.
I'm active. Yeah, I'm actively involved in it right now. So that's why I brought that up. It's been ongoing for a few months, maybe 3 months. I can't, I don't remember exactly when we started, but
Hmm.
so it was a very interesting process. Um, over the years, I've learned how to uh, go into someone's house, introduce myself, explain what I do. People are usually very nervous when this happens, and so it was nice to see the process go from a conversation to further conversation to understanding to what do you think? Gee, I'd really like to get in on your property. I mean, to no, no, no. Well, maybe yes. And finally, we got there and have this wonderful meeting
Hmm.
where everybody feels better and um, go from there.
I think that's great. I mean, when the outcome is when there's a feeling of comfort,
Yeah,
then that's the goal,
that
right?
almost always happens
Yeah, that's the goal.
because that's the goal, and it's like people, and I don't mean this condescendingly. It's like a child having a nightmare. That's
Right.
how people feel. And when I come in, I'm like the parent that they wake up to that says, "Oh, you're awake now. It's okay." Because I take away the scary part because it's not scary. There's nothing scary. There is no scariness to it. Nobody dies, you know. So you heard tapping on the wall. That's scary. It's the context you put it in. So people are usually like, "Oh my God, that's so relieving. Now there's a person. Now they identify it as history, or you know what I mean? It's not a demon floating in from the Middle East or something."
That would be interesting, to say the least.
Well, people believe that.
Hmm. I've never heard that before. That would be
Well,
very.
they a
That's
lot of a
different.
lot of the traditional demon names and demon, and there are going to be people out there that are going to correct my ass right and left, but they come from Middle Eastern
You know it's
uh,
coming.
beliefs. Yeah. Well, there are people that make their livelihood being demonologists.
Oh, of course.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Very famous people.
yeah,
Um, we talked a little bit about. Actually, we talked very little about remote viewing and how that works when you do it. Earlier, perhaps you can give me some more details and let the audience know about your remote
sure.
viewing.
Typically when I work, even if I'm going to a residential investigation that I'm aware of, with my team, without my team, I have a process, and it always, well, almost always, involves starting to, and we use the term read. We all understand the broadness of that word and what I mean. Whenever I start to read a site, I start remotely in advance of us going there, or if the person is just not local. And the process is, I use that term conscious triangulation just because I tried to put a name to it. Um, it's if you were to come to me with a sincere desire to understand or get an answer to a question, and I emphasize a sincere desire, Because if you come to me trying to prove something to trick me, oftentimes I can't work. It just doesn't work. So I need a questioner and I need a neutral label of the case. If, let's say, I'm going to a residential investigation and they live on Green Street, well, we're going to call the case Green Street, and that's all I'm going to know. I want no further information. So my team knows that, and I explain to law enforcement and other people that's the way it works. Once I have that label, I have the questioner and I have me. It seems like a circuit is created. Once that circuit's created, I can feel it. And once that circuit is created, I receive information sometimes immediately. So we can be talking on the phone. I can say, okay, what are we labeling this? We say Green Street. And I'll say, give me a minute. And people think, 30 minutes. And sometimes literally within a minute or two, I'm starting to receive information and can start talking intelligently about what's going on. How does that work? I don't exactly know.
How long have you been able to do that?
I've actually been able to do it, the actual, I've been able to do it my whole life, but I've defined this process over like the last, say, 5 years, where I really started working in a broad sense with multiple different things. I just, by experience, learned that this seems to produce the best quality information. So that's why I use it.
Sounds like a good tool.
It seems to work, once again, it's not magic. So I think there's a method to doing this.
Sure. I mean, you've heard of people in the late 60s being able to do this. Started doing this remote viewing, and
well, that's something a little bit different.
The government funding
this.
program is what I'm talking about, of course.
Yeah, that's really
goats,
remote
I think that's what
viewing.
it's called.
Yeah, that's really remote viewing. And I've never really tested myself doing that. Like I've never really tested myself to see a military base in Russia or something like that. So I'm not sure I can do that. So we talk about language. Remote viewing is that. What I would do is remote reading.
Oh, gotcha.
It's a little bit different. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But sometimes I can tell you the color of the house. I can tell you the layout of the rooms. I can tell you where the shed is in the backyard. Sometimes I can.
And when you relate this to working with law enforcement and aiding them in these investigations, it makes a big difference in their investigation, of course.
Well, it's funny. Detectives are detectives.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and they have a job to do. And I understand what they need. That's one of the reasons I work well in that environment, because I view myself as a tool and I want to be a useful tool. And for me to be a useful tool, I need to produce information that is new, that allows them to build a case, to press charges, to go to court, to get a conviction. So sometimes when I've worked with law enforcement, it's not often that happens. But sometimes what I can do is confirm and broaden their understanding of what they already know. So they may know that this guy died here and he got shot 3 times and he drove a green truck, and I may come in and tell them all that where I couldn't have known it. And they think, oh yeah, it's cool and everything, but what difference does it make? It doesn't move the case forward. So moving the case forward is a process. So it's not like you walk in and boom. I mean, sometimes maybe some people do, but with me, it's not been like that. Boom, the case is solved. But I've come close. I've come very close. I've identified people clearly who were the main people of interest in a case. And I've explained their motives, the events, exactly what happened. I've done this all remotely. So the investigating officer knows that I'm real because I just told him exactly what he knew without being able to know that.
Including with Deadline Paranormal, how long did you say that you've been doing these investigations?
I would say, in a formal sense, about 5 years.
About 5
Before
years.
that, before that, it was less formal, and it took me kind of going through a few situations as an adult to kind of come to the conclusion that I'm never going to stop doing this. This is just a part of my life. And I might as well bring it to the next level, if you say that. And that's when I began actively getting involved with the paranormal community.
And how long would you say that is? Besides the 5 years, anything before that?
In
Because we
terms of a
talked,
story,
we talked and we said that that there's TV or entertainment type programs that have investigation teams and that sort of thing, but that you, not taking it away from anybody doing that, but when you say real people or real investigations, that it's more like you're like, say you're going to your neighbor's house and you're helping them take care of this situation where there's a ghost or a spirit and trying to help them understand. So how long have you been doing this all together?
Well, I guess continually throughout my entire life, in one sense or another. I will tell you a story, if I may, that happened in my 20s, late 20s, that was pivotal. My brother-in-law at the time had moved into a new house, and it was a ranch home, a large kind of executive ranch home, built in the 50s. So not a real old house. And when they moved in, there were two elderly people living in a trailer next to the house. And he said, why are you living there? And they said, well, when we sell, we're moving to Florida and we want to get used to living in the trailer. So he thought, oh, okay. So anyways, he buys this house. One night, my wife and I slept over. We used to play cards and drink, socialize. So we slept over in their new house. So we slept in this one bedroom in the back that had two beds in it, twin beds, that were the former owner's beds. They left the furniture. And in the middle of the night, I woke up to a banging in the ceiling above my face, lying on my back in the ceiling. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. That's pretty noisy pipes. And I just fell back asleep. And the next morning, we woke up having coffee. And I said, boy, you got some pretty noisy pipes back there. And my brother-in-law said, what do you mean? And I said, well, in the middle of the night, I woke up, there was this banging in the ceiling. I thought it was pretty strange. Like, what kind of pipes, what kind of water pipes you have up in the ceiling there? And he says, I don't have any water pipes in the ceiling. And his wife broke down and said, oh, this is haunted. Oh my God. She really did. She really did. They had been struggling with this.
Oh,
so anyway,
wow.
That's when we knew the house was haunted.
Uh-huh.
But all of a sudden I thought, well, why did it bang on the ceiling above me? Like
Right.
it felt directed at me. I knew immediately it was directed at me. So anyways, the haunting at this house was like something you'd see on TV. Furniture would move, banging on the walls sounded like somebody was hitting the sides of the walls from the outside with a sledgehammer.
Mhm.
That loud. Doors opening and closing, thermostats going up and down. When you made a phone call from the landline, you could hear someone clicking on and off in the phone, like someone was listening, and the old landlines. One night we were there and we were playing cards, having a few beers, and there was this explosive boom which came out of the basement. We're in the kitchen upstairs. And I said, "Whoa, your furnace just backfired." And my brother-in-law looked at me and says, "No." And he says, "That's one of the noises." I said, "That's your furnace." He goes, "No, it's not. I've had my furnace checked out. We just had it checked out. That's one of the noises." So they were in terror. They were very much in a distressed state. So anyways, my wife, who hates all of this,
Of course.
hated all of this, of course, says, "That's it. I'm never staying here again. We're leaving. Let's go home." So we go home, and I'm in bed, and we're lying in bed, and I'm just drowsy, just about to fall asleep, and bang, right in front of my face, like an inch away from my nose, is this middle-aged black man. And I knew his entire story. His name was Albert Johnson, and he was a freed slave. So he was a former slave who was a freeman. And in the late 1700s, early 1800s, sometime in that time period,
Right.
he was accused of raping a white girl and was hunted down and lynched. And he was lynched in the town that my brother-in-law's house was in. So I knew everything. And the next time we talked, I explained that to them. And I said, he has to tell people that he's innocent. He was wrongly hunted down, and he's got to clear his name because he was a good man in life.
Right.
So my brother-in-law says, "Well, the other night, my brother-in-law, like me, is kind of an insomniac and will oftentimes get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and go fishing." So he was up 3 o'clock, had the dog out. They were walking, and he lived in a wooded area. And he said he saw a little ball of light that was ahead of him on this path. So he followed. And my brother-in-law, as myself, my brother-in-law was a contractor. I mean, this is not a lightweight type of person. This is a very level-headed person.
Sure.
So he follows this light, and he comes to a series of gravestones. And in Rhode Island, there are lots of his old cemeteries, but they're all pretty much identified and fenced off with markers. They're historical grave sites. They're all over the state. This one was not fenced off. There were three formal, carved, small tombstone-like headstones. And then off to the side, there was a piece of shale, a piece of flat rock with rough edges. Scratched into it was the name Albert Johnson.
Wow.
And I knew. Now, here's the interesting thing. Not that that's not interesting.
Oh, no.
My mother's relatives were some of the original citizens of the town that this was in. And I realized that he came to me because he knew my relatives
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of they were, 5 generations prior to me. But there was a link there. And that's when I started to understand how this all worked. That changed my life. Yeah, that's if you had to say where my professional life started, it would probably be about that time. And that's when I knew that I could do things differently, for sure.
That is quite a story, and that's, I mean, it's very, to me, it's plausible that
Well, it
that
happened.
right,
Yeah,
but I mean that the way it happened, that there was something reaching out, and
right.
you were the only person available that can communicate.
Yeah, I was his best option. Once again, they're just people.
Right.
This man was intelligent. He figured out his options
Th-
and figured out what his best option was.
Does that
And
allow them to go on after that? After you're able to help them understand,
yes, that's the point.
and they're
That's the point. Sometimes that person just needs someone to know the truth.
Mhm.
I've had that happen with several spirits, and everything from uh, a Native American chief and like 300 of his people all at once to someone that died in a jail cell and was still in the jail cell. And the important thing about that story also is my brother-in-law and his wife were terrified. They thought this was evil. It's not evil at all. And it wasn't scary. This guy was desperate. He wasn't banging on the walls to scare you. He was banging on the walls saying, "Help me, help
Help.
me, help me."
Right.
So these miscommunications, because of people's ignorance, happen all the time.
And in their defense, they don't know. They just
Of
don't.
course not.
They don't
Yeah,
get it. So you have your purpose, like like is mentioned in the bio, is not only you're helping the living, but you're helping the dead understand
yeah,
what's happening between both of them,
right,
and how to make that transition, if you will.
right.
I think that's
You
awesome
cannot
and amazing.
you cannot whisk spirits away. The only time a spirit resolves is by their own choice. And you literally can talk them into it. You can help them. One of the things that I think I mentioned before, but this seems to be part of my ability, is that I seem to act like a mirror to
Mhm.
spirits. They see me. And and I use the term see in excuse me, in quotations, they see me, and in our conscious link, they see themselves. And when they see themselves, they become aware of themselves. And sometimes it's just that awareness that's needed to trigger the cascade of emotions that allow for them to resolve. Because peace is only known when Dave Cruz doesn't exist anymore. Your
Mhm.
consciousness is independent of Dave Cruz.
Right.
You have to say goodbye to Dave Cruz. And people have a hard time doing that. You
Fascinating.
know, people will say, "Oh, my grandmother's here, and it's okay. She just tries to keep an eye on me, and she loves me." And I tell her, she's very comforting to have her watching over me. And I will say to that person, "Well, you know something? If you want to do what's right for your grandmother, you need to tell your grandmother that she doesn't need to be attached to helping you, that you're okay, and you can take care of yourself, thank you, and that Grandma, it's time for you to not worry about that. And it's time for you to let that all go and know peace. So thank you, Grandma, but it's time to finish this.
That's simple.
That's simple.
Oh.
And it works. Because people can have ego struggles for negative things, but they can also have ego struggles out of love. That's why you will see, a father dies in a car crash and he's determined to show up at his daughter's wedding. And he will stay around until he can communicate with his daughter at that time somehow, if he has the ability to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he will resolve.
That's so cool. And you do this, you help people, and you do these investigations, and you don't ask for anything.
No, actually I do. And it's really silly, but I have these odd little superstitions, I have to admit.
Okay.
So if I'm on a residential investigation, I have a fee, and that fee is 1 cigarette. And the reason for that is I just have this strange feeling that the tobacco seems to restore me in a very unique way after I've done an investigation. And I don't smoke cigarettes. I used to, but I don't now. So yes, I have a fee, 1 cigarette, as crazy as that might be. But no,
I've heard crazier.
My other superstition is about money. And yes, it's very noble. I don't take money and everything, and I don't really want the money. I really don't. It's not about money for me. But the other reason is I feel if I take money, I'll lose my ability to work. I just have this sense. So I can't touch it while I'm working. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to transact anything. Nothing. I just can't turn this work into a transaction. I can't.
Right. No, that is awesome though. That's amazing. You know, we're actually coming up on the end of the show.
Okay.
And but I want you to come back. And
oh yeah,
definitely
sure.
We're going to get into more topics, especially the whole consciousness thing, because I'm working on it. it's getting there, but I still feel that we can go way deeper and maybe even do most of the show on that. But I appreciate you talking to the audience, my audience, and letting them get to know you and actually, know who Constantine is. And of
Yeah.
course it's a pseudonym, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm just a person.
Right, exactly. And just as are we all. But I want to ask you, where can people find you and be able to get into contact with you in case they need your help?
Well, the easiest way is through Facebook and through Messenger. What I would ask people, I have, maxed out on friends, and I'm very selective about who I will engage with on Messenger. So
Yeah.
if you have a question or an issue specific to what I do, you can send me a message on Messenger, but please be formal and businesslike. Introduce yourself, state in a clear manner what your question or concern is, and then I'm much more likely to respond to you than wave, poke. Hey, what's going on? Poke, wave, poke, wave. You'll never get my attention on Messenger if you do that. You've got to be professional and businesslike. You've got to be able to compose an introductory statement that sounds like you're legitimate, so I will talk to you.
I don't say anything wrong with that. You got to be careful nowadays on Facebook. You definitely do. Do you have any investigations coming up either by yourself or with Deadline Paranormal?
Well, I know there's one in the works with Deadline, and they have not shared the information with me yet, which is typical. They don't. They know how to. They're my handlers in a sense, so they know how to get the most out of me. Even though I might say, "Oh, tell me about it. Tell me," they're like, "No." So yeah, they're great guys.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
go ahead.
and we're fussy. We're fussy. You know, we don't do public investigations, and we really only try to go to legitimate situations. So legitimate situations requiring Deadline Paranormal are not all that common, you know, so you kind of work off and on. It's not like every week you're going on to a new site. It just doesn't work like that.
Right. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Constantine, for being on the show tonight, and to get to know you more, let the audience get to know you more. Topic and fascinating show with you. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Well, you're a good host, and it was worth the wait.
Thanks. Like I'm so sorry, but like I said, you know, a lot of life happens, right? So
Semper Avante, always moving forward.
Yeah, okay. And it's true. That is definitely a true statement. So thanks again, man. I appreciate it. And you know, Godspeed.
Have a wonderful night.
All right, you too, brother.
Bye.
Take care. All right, that's all the time we got. Thanks to you, everyone, for joining the show. And you have that information. I'll definitely have some links for Constantine. And thank you so much for being on the show again, Constantine. And just want to remind everybody that Beyond the Strange is owned and copyrighted by Dave Cruz. Cannot be simulcast, rebroadcasted, or copied without written consent of Beyond the Strange. Also, the views and opinions are not necessarily that of Beyond the Strange, hosts, guests, and affiliated networks. Listeners are encouraged to conduct research and formulate their own opinions. Executive producer and creator of Beyond the Strange is Dave Cruz. Co-executive producer is Deb J. Cruz. Disclaimer and voice work by Casper Parks. Visit CasperParks.com. Music is by Alan Hall and Zebrafish. Visit SoundCloud.com Zebrafish for Zebrafish's music. And thanks to everyone reposting on Twitter, Facebook, and in the YouTube chat. And remember to tell your friends about Beyond the Strange. Keep visiting the website. You'll see when the next show is ready to post. And thank you all again. Have a great night. Stay safe, stay strange, and hasta.